This part of the establishment is reserved for regular customers who paid an entry fee. Sorry, but I can't let you in.
Hello and welcome to the dungeon. My name's Dan, and in today's video we've been playing a lot of Greedfall. Before we begin, I apologise, it's been some time since my last video. I've had quite a few things on, and also Greedfall is a very lengthy RPG. According to Steam, I've put in 56 hours worth, but it easily could have been 60 or more. Don't get me wrong, this isn't The Witcher 3 or Breath of the Wild, but considering the size of the studio making it, it is a considerable length of a game. Anyway, let's get into this. So Greedfall is made by the French company Spiders, which, nice name, and I am familiar with them from their Mars Warlogs and Technomancer game, which are both in the same world. And for both of those games I quite enjoyed them, but please bear in mind that Spiders is not a AAA studio. Definitely not an indie studio by any stretch of the imagination, but absolutely not AAA either. Somewhere nice and in the middle. And I thought this about the Technomancer, and even more so with Greedfall. They are very much punching above their weight. They are definitely optimistic. They are reaching for the moon, and have they reached it yet? No, not yet. Let's start at the beginning. Greedfall is a fantasy-based RPG, but it's not set in the medieval era. Oh no no no, you see Greedfall is set in, I'd say, 16th/17th century conquering the Americas type setting, which is, you know, a breath of fresh air. We've got new fashions, new types of weaponry. Gunpowder is very effective in this one. New politics between all the different factions. And just something a bit different that I wish other studios would try to get in on. It doesn't always have to be medieval or futuristic. Sometimes you can do some in between. So this is an RPG, and like in all proper RPGs, the first thing you do after you've done the settings is create your character. And Greedfall is very extensive when it comes to how your character physically looks. You can be both male or female should you wish. I don't think it makes too much difference for the overall story. And you've got yourself a wide range of different skin colours, hair colours. You can alter the shape of your face, facial hair, tattoos, all that good customizing stuff. The point is, you can make a character look how you want, and it's okay. I've definitely seen a lot worse than this. But considering that all the choices in this game are human only, so no Khajiit or Argonian, it does a good job of making each face you choose look distinct. For the NPCs I found, there were a few faces I definitely saw once or twice, but for the main characters, considering all the different clothes and equipment you can get, I did not see that much in terms of recycling. So once you've created your character, you get to find out more about yourself. You are Disade, Legate of the Merchant Congregation. You will be hearing that sentence quite a lot. You are practically a diplomat, so you have an excuse to go on faraway travels and meeting all sorts of new people, which I quite like. It's good whenever a game puts a reason behind why you're doing the type of things you're doing, other than just being, you're an adventurer, go out and do adventure things. Here, it's your job, so why wouldn't you do it? There is a brand new continent discovered called Tier 3D, which may or not be based on the Americas, and you are going there with your idiot cousin to start a new life. You are leaving behind, I can't believe it's not Europe, mainly because everything is so stinky and bad, but also because a lot of people are suffering from a disease called the Malachor, which is a bit nasty and lots of people die from it. On this new continent, Tier 3D, it's hoped there is a cure for the Malachor, which you can bring back to the continent and save some lives. The problem with Tier 3D, for all these people, is that it's already kind of occupied. There are some people there already, and they don't take too kindly to foreigners coming onto their turf, as you would expect. Some might consider this game to be a colonizer's fantasy. If only they could go back to the 16th century and relive those glory days of going to America and putting a flag in the ground. And I can see why some people might get rather upset about that idea. There isn't really much to do with colonizing within the game itself. Mainly the European-esque people have their parts and the natives have theirs. There's not really a lot of crossover. I, for one, found the parallels very interesting because it reminded me very much of my American history course back in school, learning about the early days of the West. There are, of course, some major differences. First of all, the natives of Tier 3 are by no means Native Americans. If anything else, they sound very Irish. Take this lady, for example.
I'm not talking about warriors, Renaikse, but villagers kidnapped in our villages. They mainly attack on all Menawi, those carrying the mark of the bond like you. They capture them, and we never see them again. We don't know what they are doing to them, but we are going to release them.
I see. But our merchants have no role in this. They are not warriors. So why kill them?
They brought food and weapons back to our enemies. We could not let them pass. If your merchants had fled, we would not have pursued them. But they resisted, so they died. The city of Loyans is no longer to receive food or weapons. Nothing.
And I find it a bit of weird world building that there are people of different skin colours on both the European-esque people and the native people. It's a little strange, and it can be explained in the lore throughout the story, but I won't get into that too much. Now, another thing to mention is this is very much a game that was inspired by the Dragon Age franchise. I mentioned it in my Inquisition review that Dragon Age Origins I think is one of the best video games ever made, and this is trying to emulate that. Of course, it doesn't succeed, but let's not hold that against spiders. How it tries to emulate it is follows. So a third person perspective, no first person I'm afraid. You have a bunch of companions, you have to try and be nice to your companions so they hang around and don't try and betray you, which could happen. And you got various ways of getting through conflicts. You can by all means draw your sword and get hacking and slashing, but you can also take the talk heavy approach. And I found it again very refreshing that you can resolve so many issues just by talking to people and mediating between groups. It does help putting a lot of points in your charisma, which I did straight away, but there are times where a silver tongue just won't cut it. And let me be clear, this is not a fight heavy game. This is a lot of talking to people, a lot of going from one area speaking to someone to another area to have a conversation, to going back to the first area, to maybe go into a third area, and so on and so forth. If you don't like this type of game, Greedfall may not be the one for you. You are a diplomat after all, and one thing you have to do is maintain the peace between all the various factions. And what I find quite cool is factions plural. Not just two either, not just the settlers and the natives, but the settlers are split into 3 or 4 basically. You've got the faction of Taleme, who are very much religious zealots who like inquisitors and putting things to the stake and burning them. Very nasty. And then you've got Al-Sad, I believe, who are kind of based on more Middle Eastern imagery with all the different arches they have in their buildings and everyone seems wearing a turban. They are more scientifically minded, very more technological. Their soldiers have a lot more firearms, they have laboratories, scientists, doctors, who may or may not be doing cruel experiments. So yes, they can be nasty as well. You've got the North, who have all these facial tattoos. These are basically sailors who transport people from one continent to the other. They have their own histories and their own traditions, one of which you get to find out about early in the game as you try and look for a missing cabin boy. You have to be nice to them as well. You've got the coin guard, who are basically mercenaries who look after people. They have issues in their ranks too. There's a lot going on between all these different groups. There are a lot of subquests in this game, and these aren't necessary. You can just stick to the main plot, but the subquests do flesh out all the different people, particularly your companions, all of whom represent a different group, and doing all this extra legwork does give you more benefits with said group, which you may need later in the game. If you're familiar with Dragon Age Origins, then you'll know why. So your companions are a fun bunch. You've got Kurt, who you start off with. He's basically your bodyguard friend who taught you how to use a sword. He's a big burly guy who is no nonsense and likes to fight and do a good job. Then you've got Vasco, the sea captain, who likes to put poison on his blade. Fiora, the native princess. Petrus, who's got the most honeyed voice I've ever heard. Seriously, listen to this guy.
Room reeks of alcohol.
And not just any old alcohol, if my nose does not deceive me. Cornelia always had great taste when it came to drinking. We are here at the heart of human depravity. Outrageous luxury, excessively priced alcohol, obvious debauchery.
And Aphra, who's all about that science. Now, they all have their own histories, they all have their own motivations, different connections to you, and it is good just trying to manage your group, trying to work out who haven't I used in a while, should I put them in, should I take that person out, so on and so forth. Also different fighting techniques to keep things interesting in combat. So just like in real life, you can, if you wish, try to romance some of your characters, which is all about putting points into a certain area and saying the right things. However, things might not go down the way you wish.
It was strangely moving, I think. What about you?
It could have been a perfect moment, had it just been the two of us. Like those young people.
Is that really the only thing you took away from this experience? I'm starting to think that my masters were right. Proximity is harmful to research. Anything else?
And yes, whilst I was playing this game as a male character, I was given the option to try and bang the male sea captain or the male bodyguard, so make of that what you will. There's one thing I want to mention regarding the quests quickly, which I really liked. Not only are they quite extensive, which can be a bit long and laborious after a while, but what I'm getting at is that a lot of the times these quests, these optional quests, will weave into the main quest. So for example, once me and my idiot cousin arrive on tier 3 for the first time, we are given a bottle of some kind of liquid, which is to help us readjust to the new continent. That is actually quite a major plot point, and it's only in an optional subquest, which has nothing to do with any of my companions directly, that I find out why that was, and why that is so important. You can decide the consequences of someone's actions. You can basically choose someone to live or die. Furthermore, you can get involved in the natives' politics. And even more so, not only are the settlers not a united front, but the natives aren't either. One particular quest had me trying to help a native merchant who wanted to embrace the new people and try to sell them stuff. But the other natives didn't like that and wanted to beat him up, so I had to intervene, even though it wasn't really my fight to do so. For the most part, with one exception, this wasn't a game that wanted to preach so much about these values. It wanted to invite discussion, the exception being, of course, climate change. There is definitely an environmental side of things in this one, which does work in the context of this story. It is a RPG fantasy after all, and there is magic, although how magic works isn't really something that's really gone into. You see, both the settlers have magic and the natives. It's just different types, and although there is some talk as to how the settlers do what they do, how the settlers do their magic, just brushed under the rug, I guess. Just to recap, there are certain things that this game does very well. This is world building, plot. I like the voice acting, that's very comprehensive and definitely immersed me in the world. I like the quests, even if they can get very lengthy and repetitive at times. All the different cultures have their own distinct ways of looking and acting. There's a ton of lore and a lot to just lose yourself in. Now, on to the not so good. Greedfall reuses its assets and settings way too much. For example, when you leave the cities on Tier 3D and you go off into the wilderness, it's not open world, there are different hub areas where you can travel to, but they all look the same more or less. They're all green, wooded, have a few rocks in, maybe a cliffside, a few villages here and there, but essentially it's the same damn forest. Yes, you might get a swampy area, yes, you might get a bit on the coast, although not a lot, considering it's an island. I'm a bit surprised there wasn't more coastal areas. Occasionally you go underground, maybe you'll find a few ruins, but for the vast majority of the outside areas, it's green woodland. It does have a night and day cycle, which is nice, makes things look a little different, particularly in Twilight, but it has no weather patterns or seasonal changes. There's no rain, there's no snow, no harsh winds, all glorious sunlight. Great for a holiday, not so great for having variety in a believable fantasy world. And yes, if you've not heard already, your companions say the same bloody thing every time they get into a fight. There's only so many instances of watch out, grenade, or things about to get dicey before they really start to grind your gears. And can we please talk about all these missions that has you dressing up as a sailor? Who does this game think I am, Pro Jared? And as for assets, this game uses the same portrait of a young woman at least 100 times over, looking at various buildings and manors and whatnot. Going into this one guy's palace, I literally went from a hallway upstairs to the main area, and I saw the same portrait of this young lady 3 times. She was just everywhere. It was like the equivalent of that muscular guy holding that baby in the 80s. A lot of the interiors do look the same. Same type of furniture, same type of layout, which really annoyed me. Every city also has the coin guard, which is where the soldiers stay, which it also has a tavern next to it. It has the jail underneath, it has the training rooms at the back. Once you've been to one, you've literally been to them all. It even ripped off its previous game, the Technomancer, by having the arena section. This is where you go to this underground part of the tavern and you fight people and animals for money, fame, whatever. You get to do it and get to feel a big man whilst doing it. I don't mind the arena, it was a nice little distraction, but it was literally the same as the Technomancer, albeit with a slightly less tech skin to it. For the quests as well, often the same people will be involved with multiple quests. I got to know a lot of these tribal leaders very well, just because they were involved in 3 or 4 different quests. And the guy would be like, hello again, how can I help you now? So very repetitive in places. Considering all different places you can go to and see, I would say it could do with being trimmed down with some of the quests. Maybe at least 10 to 15 hours shorter would probably be just right. In terms of visuals, I had this on high, although to be honest with you, my graphics card was aching to be released from its misery. And it does look quite nice at times. The foliage of the forest, the water effects at the coast, puddles look nice. Character faces do look okay, although there is a bit of a mismatch sometimes when they talk. Clothing and armor are good, so it can be a nice looking package. Although there are a lot of bugs and visual issues. A lot of the times they would go all grainy for some reason, I had no idea why, like it was some kind of film from 1950. And pop-ups got quite atrocious. Literally walking down a forest and oh, a bear! Where did he come from? The voice acting is good, the voices are very distinct, and I could easily tell who was talking, even with my eyes closed. The music for this game is very subtle. There wasn't a single track that stood out as a good tune, but there wasn't a bad one either, and I think that's deliberate. I think what they were trying to do with the music is try to create a division between the settled area, which is more European, more kind of classical sound to it with the strings and piano, with the more, let's just say, savage part of the island. So a lot more war drums or rattling pieces of wood, more kind of deep singing with long notes. And one thing that annoyed me was that any time a hostile situation could happen, the music would change and be all kind of drums and tension. But it always happened far too soon. I was going into an area and I heard the music thinking, oh no, it's time for a fight. And I couldn't work out why for ages, and sometimes I wouldn't even find out at all. I would just keep on going. And I was like, okay, guess I escaped whatever that was. So yes, not a soundtrack I would ever listen to in isolation, but it helped create the setting of two worlds colliding. Now onto the combat, and this is one thing I will give it a point in. It can be a little floaty, it can feel like your attacks don't have much weight to them, at least with the sword. But I would suggest, if you ever are playing, definitely try the hammer or the mace or something a bit heftier. That has a bit more punch to it. And Greedfall has a new addition to their formula, which wasn't in the previous games, of armor. You see, you can equip armor, but so can your companions and enemies. A bit of a meta game in this is chipping away at your opponent's armor until it's all gone. After that, your attacks will do a lot more damage. If you attack before chipping away, then it just won't be as effective. And you can switch weapons on the fly. You've got two different main ones you've got, so you can have one dedicated for armor chipping, the other one for high damage. You also get a gun, and literally all that is just taking it out. You have auto lock on this game, which is a little annoying, but you get used to it, and you shoot the thing you're looking at. There's no skill involved, it's all about timing and knowing when to use it, but that is quite useful for both damage and armor removal. Combat can be very quick, very nasty. Sometimes enemies which I thought were a little low leveled have gotten best of me. A lot of it is because there is a good use of dodging and blocking involved. You have your basic attack, you've got your heavy attack or kick, you've got your block, and you can roll away like it's Dark Souls all over again. This can be fun, it makes it tactical, and when you lose your armor, then shit gets real, because you can take maybe 2 or 3 hits and then die. Sometimes, even with armor, bosses can just smack the shit out of you. I would say they're trying to go for a Dark Souls type way of doing things, but the problem is, with companions, it never feels like that, because often the boss in particular will just focus on your 2 companions and let you do your own thing and chip away at its ankles. Occasionally there are times where you have to fight a boss by yourself, and they were fun, challenging battles, but more like that would have been appreciated. In terms of enemy variety, there's quite a bit here, mainly bad guys. You do get the occasional bandits who want to have a go, but they just really stand there waiting for you, and they're very easy to avoid, so a bit more work on the AI would have been nice. You can get tangled with all the main factions in this game, although not so much for natives, here and there, but for a game where the focus is on the tension between natives and the settlers, I would have thought there'd be more native fighting going on, but hey. There is a ton of wildlife to endanger, lots of big mammals, bears, goat creatures, wolves, various reptiles, these annoying poisonous bat type creatures. A lot of them do get oversized and reused again, so once you kill one, expect its evolution to be in the next chapter. Ah yes, and the natives also have access to these large guardian type creatures, which are very Cthulhu / Dark Soulsian again. They're basically based on the type of area they're found in. So you got like the mountain type, you got the woods type, the plains type, the swamp type, the beach type. You get it. These were fun battles, and like I said, if you have companions, it's okay. You can just let them do most of the hard work. If they fall down, you can just pause time and use a potion. But as mentioned, once you've seen one boss like this, expect to see it at least one more time. You do get a huge assortment of hats as well in this game, ranging from tricorn to turbans to sombreros, the kind of stuff that Puritans used to wear, not to mention battle helmets of various shapes and designs, various native masks, so you definitely can enjoy the fashion side of things with this one. Weapon customization is also pretty huge, but it's a little basic. Basically, you have a weapon, it might have some slots in the hilt or the blade or wherever, and if you can find some crafting material, often various types of iron, you can then get an upgraded hilt or blade which does more damage or more armor penetration, whatever you need. The same thing applies to armor as well, and that makes you more resistant to, say, poison or magic or other types of damage. If you like RPGing as a spellcaster of some kind, then you do have various magic abilities using this, mainly involving a magic missile of some sort. Unfortunately, I went for a stealthy soldier build, not a magician, so I can't really talk much about that, but if I do play this game again, then that's what I'll do in the future. Going on to stealth, and yes, this game does make use of that at times. You can sneak on by a guy, press a button and kill said guy, that's nice. You can also apply that to wildlife who do sleep at night, which is a feature I do appreciate. But one thing I noticed, which is contrary to what we're doing with stealth, is that when it becomes dark at night, you automatically take your light out. So if you want to start following some guy because it leads to his hideout or a secret mission, then it kind of breaks the immersion when you're lit up like Christmas. Now here's where we get to the deal breaker for some. This might just be on PC, the console varieties might be better, but this game is janky as hell. We're talking characters getting trapped not only around furniture, but in it, in corners particularly. When you talk to someone, if you have a second companion in the team, that person can literally block the camera shot, so all you see is some guy's shirt while Fiora is trying to give you a sad story about what happened to her father. I once saw a woman with an axe trying to cut down an invisible tree, that was fun. Or people raise invisible bottles to their mouths to drink invisible wine. One of my favourite issues is when someone is standing on an invisible table and you can have an actual chat with them, like so.
Desade, I'm happy to see you. Can I do anything for you?
I think it's because they want to put in a lot of animations, and I do appreciate that, and there are some good ones here. You got things like random NPCs just knocking on each other's doors, hard at work doing whatever it is they're doing, and my personal favourite of the soldier having a crafty little Wii. In terms of major performance, you might have seen some stuttering in the footage on screen, but that was more so my graphics card really needing to go to a farm up north. When I played it on lower settings, it ran a little smoother than this, although the waiting times were a little obnoxious. It did crash once when I tried to boot it up, so that was a pain, but I had no further issues since. No game-breaking bugs whilst I was actually playing it. Oh, another thing is that often characters will cut off their lines for some reason. So here we are, that was Greedfall. A lot to talk about, but it is a long, lengthy game, and one that I do wish to go back to just to see some more outcomes. As I said before, there is a lot of choice in this game. What you can do really affects what happens later on. The ending I got was a little disappointing, so I will play this at least once more in the future, maybe as a different build, go for a more mage build, try and be a bit more of a dick, try not to complete so many missions to see what happens, because that's the thing, and see how that goes. I did enjoy my time with Greedfall. For me, Greedfall gets 3.5 creepy duck doctors out of 5. I am glad to see spiders are getting better at their craft, and I'm looking forward to their next work, especially if BioWare are going to shit the bed with Dragon Age 4. But enough of that. Anyway, thank you for watching and for making it this far. Again, another lengthy one, but thought I had some things to get off my chest with this one. Come join me next time for the Outer Worlds, and if you want to see more of my content in the future, then hit me up with a sub. Thanks for watching, and I shall see you next time. Bye!